On this episode, we talk about the Trump money that was revealed for the 2019 growing season. We also discuss the recent Iowa State University Extension webinar providing advice on options for the rest of this planting and growing season. Listen in for actions you can take to assist your farm operation in these wet conditions. Remember, you can always find something positive in a not-so-ideal situation. Stay optimistic.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman from Mershman Seeds. Welcome to Cup of Joe. And today we have Tommy Johns, Turk Rigginator, Ben Pieper, and boy, what a week. Lots of things have changed since we last talked to you. And I think we'll just start off with Turk. You know, and the wet weather continues, but there's some things going on the government side. What happened, Turk?
Again, the good news, Sonny Perdue announced this week that there'd be some more Trump money coming. First payment will be, I think, in July, they said, and then additional payments to follow. But the change this year in the program from last year's program is it's not based on how many acres you plant and what your yield is this year. It's going to be based on, I believe, a county average yield, and it's going to be up to the amount of acres that you planted last year for soybeans, in the case of soybeans or corn, and so you can't alter your planting acres and get more than what you had last year for acres. So, but you still have to plant in order to get it. So they're talking in the neighborhood of $2, and so to be broke up over 2 or 3 payments, and so it's going to be real money.
$2 per bushel on soybeans, somewhere in that, just a ballpark number.
Yeah. It's $16 billion aid package, and 12.5 of that are going direct aid to farmers. So it'll be an increase over last year by about 25%. It sounds like.
All because of the trade war with China.
All because of the trade war with China, and China is continuing to backpedal and stall a little bit, but again, they're paying a 25% tariff on everything that's coming in now, and Trump says that'll more than fund what we need to do to help our customers that are being affected, our American citizens that are being affected by the trade war. So China's paying for the program either way.
Yeah, I've read a lot of articles, and it's, you know, most farmers agree they want trade, not aid. But in this case, you know, we got to bridge the gap until we get that trade.
Yeah, it's again, we kind of talked about this last year. Both sides of Congress seem to be in agreement that this is the right thing to do, in light of the fact that China is backpedaling on some of their previously agreed to terms of the agreement. So Trump says our economy is growing, theirs is going the other way. We can hold out and they'll pay the bill.
So Turk, so guys that are, you know, thinking that maybe they might be able to capture more money for soybeans versus corn, it's going to be based on 2018 acres, correct?
Up to. You still have to plant 2019, but you can't have more acres than what you had in 18.
Okay. So that brings us to the question now, okay, so if you don't plant your crop, are you going to be eligible for the Trump aid?
As of right now, I do not believe so.
Okay, we just don't know.
We don't know all the details yet, but as of right now, you have to plant in order to get be eligible to get it. And again, with all the delayed planting and talk of preventive planting, stay tuned, I guess, to see what'll happen and what the rest of the results are. I'm sure that our farmers will be taken care of one way or another somehow, regardless of their situation.
So they'll have to check down at their local offices to get the details. I mean, right now, we know there's going to be money. That's and then, you know, how they're going to divvy it out is still a little bit cloudy yet.
That's correct. So again, and I'm sure FSA offices are just now even hearing the same news that we are about the same time, maybe a little bit before. So there'll be a time lag before they'll even be able to give you information, I'm sure.
Okay.
But again, the main thing is in my opinion, is you need to plant the crop to maximize your ability up to 2018 acres.
Okay.
So,
Well, the 300-pound gorilla also in the room is, preventive planning. We just sat through the Iowa State webinar that was on Friday afternoon, or Friday morning, I should say. We'll post that link so that our listeners and watchers can actually watch the entire webinar, which talked about crop yields on corn and soybeans, as far as what they can expect for yield and average frost dates, and Ben, it went through just about everything that we've been talking about, but give it the latest information as far as the average frost date here in Iowa, and then they also alluded to that each state is doing the same thing. So if you're in Missouri or Illinois, Nebraska, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, Kansas, where we all sell beans, in Wisconsin, you can check with those folks too.
Right. Well, and then I think one of the biggest takeaways from that meeting this morning or yesterday morning was that they needed to definitely get everything in writing from their insurance agent, make sure that they had a plan and that they understood it before they made a decision on what they were going to do as far as delayed planning or preventive planning. But
the information that we seen there, it looked like it always paid to put the bean crop in, even if you took delayed planning on corn. Had to take delayed planning on corn, putting that bean crop in behind those acres that were intended for corn looked like it was always a better payment option all the way through.
That's what it looked like to me too, is that farmers still have options, and then it sounded like they would still insure that soybean crop.
Yes. Yep.
So the thing is right now, as we're sitting here looking at soggy fields and the forecast saying more rain coming, the pressure's building on farmers on what to do, and it sounded like you really need to talk to your crop insurance person and work through the options. And Iowa State's giving you lots of information to do that, to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm. They also had some good models on there too, as well as you could enter in the maturity on the corn that maybe you have already purchased ready to plant, and you can see what your liabilities may or may not be. So the big question right now is, we still have some time to plant soybeans. We got time if things get dried out. Joe, you think our window here for soybeans is still?
Oh, we have a great window yet for soybeans.
Great.
Even on corn, it's actually about June 1st is when you start earlying up on the hybrids, right, Ben? You make some comments about that.
Well, they had some pretty interesting statistics that I haven't seen since college, so it was a nice refresher. Once you plant after June 1st, the corn plant has the amazing ability. You talk about shortening a leaf, and the math behind shortening that leaf is it takes 6.8 fewer growing degree days per day to reach physiological maturity after you plant from June 1st. So when you have a product that's like 110 day, it may act closer to like 108 or 107 day. So they use growing degree units in the example that they used this morning, or on the webinar that we watched. So the corn plant, when you're plugging into that U2U, which is the website that Iowa State produces through all their Messinet information, when you plug that in, consider the fact Purdue, there's two different websites that you use. Purdue shows you what the actual growing degree day units are on a specific variety, and then what it looks like when you're planting on August 1st. You take that calculation, then you plug it into the U2U, and it actually makes it in their example, they use 110-day corn. It actually makes sense to still be planting 110-day corn the first week of June or so.
It actually, in their example, it actually earlied up that same hybrid planted later. It actually earlied up almost a month.
Right, because it talked about end of November on your typical. If the corn plant acted the same all the way through, even after being planted on June 1st, it actually went from the end of November, early part of December, to end of October.
And the reason for that is you're not getting a whole lot of heat units after October 15th anyway.
Correct.
Well, I think the other thing they brought up that I would agree with very much, and they brought up the fact that the next 90-day forecast is for cooler than average temperatures, which is going to affect those corn hybrids, particularly after we start planting after June 1st.
Correct.
So they said you would be better to err on, based on that forecast, if that's halfway accurate, be better to err on conservative rather than to be
Take a long shot on your yield.
take a long shot and try, hey, I'm going to stick with my 115 day. I don't care if it's June 5th. I'm going to stick with it. And that might not be a good decision based on the long range forecast. And of course, that's all backed up by the fact that once ground gets moist and a lot of moisture in it, it's cooler. It stays cooler, so the air doesn't warm up as much, and just in general, we have cooler temperatures. So, we're looking at a much cooler summer right now, theoretically.
Yeah, they were saying shorten corn maturities by 1 day for every 2 days after June 1st. That's what was.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
rule of thumb. Yeah.
So really it's going to be a different decision for every farmer, whether they have the ability to dry corn, if they have good drying facilities or they don't. Everything has to come into play for every individual farmer. So it's really important to look at the whole picture, and I know every farmer out there is thinking about all those things. Nobody likes trying to dry 30% corn in December. So
No, I would agree. That drying facilities are going to be a big thing. But they also pointed out if you have good drying facilities, you can make money by staying with the fuller season hybrids and drying that moisture out.
Right.
Because of the extra bushels they're going to deliver.
as long as it doesn't get that frosty.
Right.
And I have a question for you guys. So, decided that corn is not an option for me, and I want to try to plant some soybeans because we have a little bit of a window here to do that. What should be my main concerns?
Your main concerns is trying to capture the most potential yield on your soybeans. From an agronomic standpoint, you guys can talk a little bit about the
Your herbicide
preventative
program.
plant. Yep. But the main thing to do is to don't early that maturity up until you get to the middle to end of June. But
June 15th.
because it talks about, soybeans planted 40 to 60 days apart, they still mature within 7 days of each other more than likely.
Yep.
So don't
For the
early that
same
maturity up.
maturing beans.
Yep. If I plant a 3/8, if I got 3/8 planted in April, and now we are 40 to 60 days later, and they're stabbing the beans back in the ground, those beans are still going to mature within a week of each other.
The rule of thumb is every week that you delay in planting is 1 day later in harvest, which that's hard to believe, but that's the real number.
Yep.
So that matches up exactly with
Yep.
what Iowa State said
Yep.
on a monthly basis.
Correct.
So one week, 1 day later in maturity.
And that's kind of the rule of thumb we've always went by.
What do you think about populations right now?
I think that with the majority of the state receiving the rain that they're probably going to receive this coming week, I think that if you're sticking with 140,000 typically, or 130, you want to jump that by, 10%,
Sure.
10, 15%.
Yeah, start
I'd
moving
be
it up.
more comfortable around that 160, 165. So we talked about, certain soybeans having better sustainability scores than others. Our season gets shrank by a lot, so the beans are going to be shorter.
Yep.
We talked about this about the last 3 or 4 episodes. I'm not concerned with some of our varieties that we recommend, lower planting populations. Those can now go into that 140, 150, 160 range because they
Lodging
won't
may
get
not
near
be an
as
issue.
Yep, they won't get near as tall and rank. So
Yeah, if you-
definitely be pushing the population.
If you remember last year, we had May above average. We closed our rows earlier than we ever did because, we had all that growth. And, if we're going to be cooler and, the thing is, get the bushiest bean you can find, narrow your rows down, push your population up, and you can still raise a fantastic soybean crop yet. Even plant, in the West Point area, if you get them in by the 25th, that latitude, the 25th of June, you're still going to raise a good crop. We had guys double crop wheat with soybeans last year and raised 50 bushel soybeans, and those were planted the first week of July. So, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater yet. I mean, it's still a great opportunity. And then looking at the preventive planting thing, particularly if you switch from corn to soybeans, you're going to get a potentially partial payment on that corn, come back and plant soybeans. Instead of fighting weeds, the weed bank and the fallow syndrome and all the things that are bad when you don't plant a crop. I mean, there's a lot of things that will carry over into next year if you don't plant a crop.
Right.
I think what was really interesting, is you think about maybe some of those corn herbicides that have not got put on the fields at this time where there's nothing on there. This is a really good opportunity to maybe capture to going to soybeans and trying to maximize your yield that way.
I thought the Iowa State webinar, which again, we will have the link on here so you can go right to it and watch it in its entirety, really laid out things really well from the standpoint of all the things you need to think about. Herbicide thing was one of the things they talked about, and they talked about the weed bank, the fallow syndrome, and all these other things, and then following that, then they went into the take preventive planning and some of the math that goes into that, and rather than us try to repeat everything I said,
Sure.
it would be best to get it from the source.
It was an outstanding
Yeah, Virgil and his group did a fantastic job there putting that on, and I encourage everybody to take a good look at it because it will give you a lot more information than we can cover today.
Joe, I have one question, one more to say is we talked about, if guys are going to go, if they're on rotated ground, they want to do corn this year, but they're not going to have that opportunity, so they're going to be going beans on beans. Can we talk just a couple minutes about how important it is to have a good disease package to go beans on beans, and maybe some of our, how we can stand out a little bit differently in that aspect? Or
Well, there's no question about it. With saturated soils and everything, phytophthora could be a real big problem, and so could sudden death as far as that goes, because we're still fairly cool. But 1 year beans on beans is really no issue at all for soybeans. But again, make sure you got a good phytophthora package, good sudden death package. If a level is on your seed, that's even better yet to control sudden death. You don't have to worry about standability. If we have a cool wet season, that could favor a white mold a little bit more. So in those areas that have white mold, you might want to pay attention to that a little bit. Brown stem rot, Turk, that's more of can be a beans on bean problem because it is carry over in the stubble, but it again favors more cool than hot.
My advice has always been beans on beans. The reason that you run into issue with beans on beans is because you get a disease buildup in the soil of diseases that particular variety is susceptible to. If you're going to go beans on beans, always change the variety. Keep in mind all the agronomics that are based on, but always change your variety. Never plant the same variety 2 years in a row on beans on beans.
That's good advice. That's true. If you planted Trumans last year, don't plant
Don't
Trumans
plant
this
them
year
again.
on that same field.
So,
You have any other comments on that, Ben, as far as diseases?
Just try to find the package that has the most robust. Know the problems that you've had in the past, because not everybody's going to be the same,
Sure.
And a lot of the foliar symptoms that we're going to see later on in the season, if we continue to be cool and wet, a lot of those things can be controlled by a fungicide. So it's a matter of scouting and just paying really close attention to what you got, because the inoculum built up in the soil, the rain splashes and it works its way up the plant. I'm thinking of frog eye in specific, or pod and stem blight. All of those are later season stuff. That's always built up in the inoculum of the soil. So that stuff's a matter of just a fungicide might be one of those things that actually pays off really, really well. So just keep in mind.
All good points. So, well,
one follow-up, Joe, on that is I want to just say that we're caught up on everything that we're doing here, and if somebody needs soybeans that they're going to do a preventing planting, and they need soybeans on corn and they need soybeans, we have excellent supplies and our plants ready to rock and roll to get seed to you right away.
Yeah, we're caught up. In fact, we're doing summer projects right now in West Point. Don't like to do summer projects in May, but that's the way it is. And yes, Turk, we have excellent supplies of seed, and I do think that the seed treatment is still very important. You can get disease, whether it be early planting, even in June. You get in June, you get a heavy rains, you still have that disease cycle going on there. So stay the course on your seed treatment, and yeah, we can get beans fast. We have our own fleet of trucks, our own drivers, and we'll be ready. Well, without further ado, I do appreciate all of you that sent emails in to me, and I sent some cups out. So that was very successful. I hope that brightened your day just a little bit, because there hasn't been a lot of things to be positive about. But, they always say it's darkest right before dawn. So right now, if you were in Alaska, the sun goes down at 2 a.m. and comes back up at 3 a.m. So We might need some of that Alaska sunshine here pretty soon to get this crop in. That would help. But
That'd help.
again, thanks for watching today. Be sure to watch the Iowa State webinar that we will link to on this episode. It will give you a lot more detailed information. And we appreciate your business, and we'll see you next week.